All right, we're here today with Doug Smiley, the Global Product Director of Performance Run Footwear at Under Armour. Doug, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, I see, and it's been a little bit of a journey for you personally the last couple weeks, right?
It's been an interesting one. So this is the 1 week anniversary for elbow surgery. Had a little bike accident. Luckily, nothing too severe, healing up pretty quickly. But yeah, it's been an interesting few weeks to say the least.
I mean, you look good with a sling.
I know it's
and with that one.
But all I could think of was Spies Like Us and Chevy Chase going in with the arm wrap. But yeah,
yes, I like it. Has it gotten you any free drinks recently?
No, not really. People are a little nicer, I think, generally, and everything. And everybody wants to know the story. But haven't hit the bar circuit too hard. So.
Yeah. All right. Gotcha. Well, we'll see. Maybe to celebrate the Baltimore Running Festival. And next weekend, we'll see if we can.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, anyways, we have a lot to talk about today.
Yeah.
About, in fact, the Baltimore Running Festival, the Under Armour Flow Velociti Elite team, and the shoe as well. So let's get into it. First off, tell me what you like. We already discussed your title, but what do you do at Under Armour?
So essentially, my role is to work with the product creation team. So Under Armour split. We have the headquarters here in Baltimore, which a lot of the functions are located. But in Portland, it is strictly footwear and footwear creation. So we have our inline and innovation teams. So I head up the inline team for performance runs. So any running shoe above $100, track and field, and trail running. And so it's essentially leading the product creation process from ideation all the way to the commercialization, product launch, go to markets, doing really fun things like this.
Okay, cool. So you get to do like the cool shoes is basically what you're saying.
It's good. It's athlete driven. It's performance. It's pinnacle. So yeah, that's really the fun space to be in.
Cool. And how'd you get started in footwear?
Super random. I did not grow up a runner. Did not grow up a great athlete. I was a very mediocre team sport athlete growing up playing football and tennis. Then got in college and was a rower and ran for sport. I was a lightweight rower, so you had to drop weight. And then when I finished college, undergrad, and moved to Boston for grad school, running was the most efficient thing I could do. And I loved it to keep in shape. Boston's a phenomenal running city, as you know. Mm-hmm. And then I needed a part-time job, so I got a job at City Sports, which no longer exists, but a retailer in a time, headquartered out of Boston, but had stores up and down the East Coast. Yeah. So they were in awesome urban areas. I opened a store that was here in Harbor East.
Right.
But it really catered, they were really ahead of their time because it was really about catering to that young urban athlete. So it started with the two owners who were looking for a pin to inflate a basketball and they couldn't find it anywhere in the city. But it sparked this. But it was great because I got exposure to a ton of brands, really got to understand performance run, started out working the shoe floor and worked my way up to corporates. And from there, hopped to the brand side. So
that's cool.
Pretty lucky. Yeah.
That's awesome. So how long have you been with Under Armour then?
So this is 3 years at Under Armour now.
Okay.
Yep.
And have you been at the Portland side this whole time?
Strictly the Portland side. It's been kind of an interesting first 6 months of my career were pre-COVID. So it was a lot of travel back to Baltimore, probably about once a month. But it's just now we're getting out there and starting to travel. So I'm probably out in Baltimore at least once a month and then a lot of market travel as well.
Cool. Which is where you're at right now.
Yep, totally.
This is one of those lucky podcasts where we actually have the guest in studio.
I didn't take the Believe in the Run private jet out here or anything. So it worked out good.
We can make that happen next time because we definitely have a private jet at our disposal. Okay. So we want to talk about, we have, so actually Brandon on our team is part of this.
Yeah.
And
super cool.
This is kind of cool. But Under Armour is doing a special kind of campaign around the Baltimore Running Festival, where you've put together what's called the Flow Velociti Elite team. And it's interesting because it's different than most teams you would put together for a promotion in that it features just normal kind of people.
Completely. It's pretty cool. And like we're coming off a huge year for running, especially being out in Oregon with, US champs, our athletes at world champs, and, they're constantly competing at Diamond League and these global events. And so as we go to the fall and look at marathon season, Baltimore Run Fest has always been huge because it's in our backyard. We sponsor it. It's really kind of endemic to the brand and a great point for us to celebrate running. And so we are going to have our pro athletes out here, but in a totally different capacity because, Under Armour is so interweaved with the run communities where we're at, especially in Baltimore, and we have connections to so many athletes. So our sports marketing team had this great idea of like, hey, we really need to celebrate the runners who are out there, who are, like I said, 9 to 5, everyday people, amazing runners in their own right, but
Right.
not professional runners.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where we don't just want to fly in some elite athlete and have them break the tape. You know, we really want to celebrate those local runners here in Baltimore, coach them out throughout the whole process, actually have our pro runners as pacers for the marathon as well, but just gives these athletes really the pro treatment. You know, they get like the hospitality tent and the nice hotel suites and all that stuff, and really kind of celebrate them, because that's really what we're about.
Yeah, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, it's always awesome to have those elites and have them racing in your, you know, whatever shoe you got going, but also, like you said, to celebrate. I mean, the everyday athlete who's getting out running miles, doing things like that, that's the core of your customer base.
And it's exciting because every city has their run culture, and of course, you know this better than anyone. For Baltimore, it's just like there's always such a unique endemic run culture at every place we're at, and we have great connections there. And like I said, going through the bios and the stories of all these runners, we have about 19 running. We had a few drop from injury. It's all unique stories, and they all got here in a different way, but it's all something unique and something to celebrate. So it's really exciting that we get to be a part of it. They get to run in our new product, so we're really, really stoked for that.
Yeah. So, well, might as well jump to the new product.
Sure.
Since you threw that in there. So you have been working on kind of your Under Armour's version of the super shoe, and yeah, maybe just talk about it, what's gone into it, and what you're looking for.
Totally, yeah. And so we're definitely not the first of this dance, but we wanted to do it through our lens and do it right. And like a lot of things at Under Armour, this really started with the athlete when we came about, where, you know, we had seen the growth of super shoes, and there was some stuff happening and internally with Under Armour where we never really hit the ground for what we needed to have our athletes compete at the highest level. So it really hit a point where they're like, hey, we don't feel competitive going out there and towing the line against these other runners who are in these super shoes, and they feel like they're at a disadvantage. So that really unified the team and say, hey, we need to find a solution and go to market really, really fast here and really deliver something that's going to make them feel competitive. So Will Lear, who we work with on a sports marketing side, who's kind of the conduit, who is one of our pro athletes, who's now working kind of between product and athlete, he summed it up best, where he said the feeling of fast has changed. You know, it's just like,
oh, that's a good
10 years. Like I said, it's one of those things that just kind of cuts through. And like 10 years ago, it's just like the race was to be as minimal as possible and low as possible, and just create these racing flats that people were not used to running in race day. And the game has completely changed. And so we wanted to create this sensation of something new here and do it through the Under Armour lens. So it was called Project Lightspeed, but it was a really collaborative effort between sports marketing, our innovation team, and our inline partners to create something unique. And it really pushed us to, you know, it was good to have the constraints of time, saying like, hey, we have to deliver something to market. Our goal is before World Championships, so June of 2022. But also one of those things where it's like we had to push hard and knew we had to be competitive, or else it wasn't going to be worth doing.
Right.
So we did essentially 3 in-depth rounds of prototypes. And the great thing now with World Athletic regulations is our athletes can compete in the wild in these prototypes as long as they're approved.
Right.
And so we're getting some real world test data of, you know, I felt competitive, I felt fast, my recovery times were quicker, or else like this just doesn't hit the mark. And so we ultimately reached on the third prototype essentially evolved in the Flow Velociti Elite. And it's some kind of existing UA technology that's been really optimized, and also some new technology we brought in as well.
Yeah, and just real quick, I think we saw one of the first versions of this shoe last year when we did the campaign with Jordan Trope, where we followed him around as he did 3 sub 2:30 marathons in 3 days, which was insane. And I think so. That I believe was that one of the first.
That was one of the early prototypes.
Okay, cool.
And so that was one of those things you were on for the journey, and that was a perfect circumstance. Whereas 3 marathons in 3 days, who knows when that's going to happen again?
Right.
But one of the things we want to validate was not just, hey, this shoe is going to make me fast on race day, but I'm going to feel fresh the next day. And that's one of the insights we kept getting. It's just like you can run at that higher threshold, and yet your legs feel fresher, and so you could keep putting that higher work. So you're getting that dual benefit of being fast and having an extra kick and extra propulsion on race day, but also your training block has been so much more solid. And so having to run 3 marathons in 3 days, it's just like no one better to do it than Jordan. But his times were amazingly consistent. He felt great over 3 tough courses, and he smashed a record. So it was super, super exciting. So that was a great validation point that allowed us to accelerate things quicker and not move backwards.
Cool. So let's talk about, as far as, you're talking about the feeling of fast has changed. And you mentioned how 10 years ago it was minimal, lighter, faster. I mean, even I think in, what was it, like 5 or 6 years ago, I think Ilya Kipchoge ran in the Nike Streak Fly or whatever, street. Why am I blanking out on it right now? Anyways, a more minimal racing shoe, racing flat, and ran like a crazy time in it. But now, obviously, we see what he's done in the Alpha Fly or Vaporfly, and what other athletes have done in their own versions of super shoes. So that feeling has changed. We're seeing shoes now with 40 millimeter, going right up against the World Athletics, stack height measurements, like for sure, right at that 40 millimeter level. And so when you talk about the feeling of fastest change, what components of the Velociti Elite are, matching that feeling?
So what we really want to do is create this kind of approach where we approach it as kind of this dynamic systems approach where it's every athlete is unique. It's like we look at our range of athletes from, the smallest 5K runner to, we have some, bigger sports athletes run into who also need a sensation, who do marathons as well. So really we want to take it from the shoe is not just going to work for a certain amount of runners, but it's going to be react to each runner and adapt to them. And so the way we could do this is just really through, like I said, our resources at Under Armour. It's great. We have a full innovation team, biomechanics, materials science, but also just that quick athlete validation here. And so we wanted to take this approach where it's not just going to work for that select group of elite athletes who are sub 215, but any runner, like I said, and this is a great validation with Baltimore Run Fest.
Yeah.
Any runner who wants to go fast and really have that extra kick and extra sensation, it's going to work for them. And so the way we did that was looking at every component and not just how they function individually, but how they come together as a system. We talk about everything is talking about carbon plates, but unless you're using it properly with the geometry and the runners engaged in it properly, it's kind of neutralized and you're not really feeling that benefit. So we wanted to create this shoe that has this alterable, pliable underfoot sensation. So you feel that reaction to the ground right away. One of the things we kept talking about is just a sensation of roll and bounce. It's smooth, it's gliding. And then what we really want to do is amplify that toe off and really move that runner forward with purpose and just have that extra snap that comes from that carbon plate in the midsole. So that's kind of how we approached it is not just saying of just like, hey, put the plate in there, we're good to go.
Right.
But looking at every component and how they come together in this unique system.
And what kind of midsole foam are you using in this shoe?
So it's a unique setup. And one of the differentiators for us, like I said, everybody's, operating within the world regulation stack heights. But with our flow technology that we launched in the Flow Velociti Wind in 2021, it basically takes off the need for a rubber outsole. And when you look at rubber outsoles, it's adding 2 millimeters, it's adding glues, and it's adding adhesives. And a lot of times the outsole is the first thing to go on a shoe, which is kind of a big deal when it's above $200.
Right.
So one of the unique things here is with our Flow outsole, we had that technology, but we really just wanted to optimize it. So we used the supercritical version of Flow to make it lighter, bouncier, more resilient, but not lose any of that ground contact durability. And from there, we built the system. So we have a full-length thermoset carbon plate that's scooped up to give you that really nice, smooth fleck at toe off. And then we use a layer of P-backs on a top layer. So you're getting that really soft, really compliant feel. And that's something we want to make sure we're actually, making sure the runners are not just running fast, but making sure they're running efficiently. So they're adapting to the ground. So when they hit, it's not feeling unstably. It's not feeling wobbly. It's adapting to their stride and setting it up for that efficient kind of move forward.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So for those watching on YouTube, you can kind of see, and we'll show a photo here so we can get a little bit of a closer look, but exactly. It's we see this top layer of P-backs or
P-backs,
yeah. And then we got the bottom layer of your supercritical, which is more of a durable, slightly firmer, more responsive layer. Gotcha. And then, so in the upper, I mean, you can see straight through it. It's clearly very breathable.
Totally. And that's one of the things that was like when we kind of look at things between creation and optimization. So we had our warp technology, which is this taped embroidered kind of exoskeleton. And when you think about it, it kind of functions like seat belts all over the top of the shoe. So when they're kind of at rest, when the runner's foot is not moving, they're kind of lay flat. But as the runner moves and you move through your stride, it locks out. So you have these little seat belts, kind of this effect all over the shoe. And what we did with this one was we had that taped and embroidered technique, but we just want to optimize it for race day. So we actually used a wash away technique where actually it has a backer, but at the factory, when you dip it in water, it dissolves. So it's completely transparent. So that helps lighten the shoe overall. So you're still getting that exoskeletal benefit, but in a really, really lightweight race day package without any irritation.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so interestingly enough, I got this shoe. My size was a little too big for me, so I had to switch it up. I should probably talk to you about that because I'm really excited to run in it. And I know that even what was the tempo shoe, the Velociti Win. Yeah, so like, that was a nice. And did the Velociti Win essentially use the bottom layer of this? Like that was the construction for that midsole.
Yep.
Yeah, which was a nice. I actually like that shoe a lot as far as like a tempo shoe, just like a snappy kind of like lightweight responsive shoe.
Yeah.
So to see that midsole combined with P-backs is pretty exciting for this shoe.
Totally. And one thing I forgot to mention too, just looking at the sock layer of saying, like I said, how can we create that system? We actually use a TPE high resiliency sock liner, just so close to foot, you're getting that extra layer of bounce. And that's something we looked at there's a lot of just kind of like really thin die cut things in there that are just made to, hold the foot in place.
Gotcha.
We want to give that fourth layer of bounce. So you get the super critical flow, you get the plates, you get the P-backs, and then you get that TPE sock liner. So it's actually this 4-layer system kind of working together.
Cool. So have your runners for the Baltimore Flow Velocity Elite team, have they been giving you feedback currently? Or are they going to give you more of that feedback after the race?
We're going to do a big recap post. So we kind of have an athlete summit, and our sports marketing team works to get that insight afterwards. So we've heard the anecdotal feedback. One of my favorite stories is Steve Klug, a Under Armour employee, but is also a runner for Faster Bastards. Like he's been trying to get his Boston qualifier, and he was in the Flow Velocity Wind, and he couldn't get the Elite in his size because it's not out yet. But he got in a shoe and he like dropped like 8 minutes off his time and hit his BQ and everything. Nice. And I think that's something we talk about. He's not an elite runner, but he's a runner who's out there competing. And like I said, the shoe works for him just because it's so dynamic and adaptable.
Yeah. It's interesting. Have you run Baltimore before? By the
I've
way?
never run Baltimore. No.
Okay. So if you're not from here, you would think that Baltimore, it's along the water. It's pretty flat course. It's one of the more hillier marathon courses.
I've heard about the hill. Yeah.
You could encounter. And then of course the only flat part of it is around like 1.5 mile long lake, where you can just like, you go in and exit at the same spot. So you just see this whole, and it's at mile like 20 of the marathon. So it's like the worst. It's kind of torture, but it'll be a good test for sure.
No, completely. I've known a ton of great runners who've come in here and they talk about the hill in Baltimore. Yeah.
So what do you see as far as the future of Under Armour, especially like here in Baltimore? And you have your campus now in Portland, so it's like both coasts, and not just Under Armour in general, of course, Under Armour running. Clearly this is your foray into more of the super shoe territory. What can we expect as far as like daily trainers, things like that?
And this is one of the great things when we develop a shoe like this. And like I said, we've seen the reaction. And as we were developing this, we were also developing the Shakedown Elite, which is that mid-distance track spike. So 1,500 to 10K, using some of the similar technologies, but like I said, being specific to the track. And it's one of those things, this kind of opens the aperture of once you do this and once you really kind of run through it full steam, the process, and understand kind of those best practices, it just speeds up the innovation cycle and how quickly we can test and iterate. So it's, as we go to market here, we get it on our, local heroes for Baltimore Run Fest. Our pro athletes are testing the prototype of the next version. Right. So you kind of have this cycle of like, as you're commercializing one shoe, the second and third versions are already in the works.
Yeah. Because I think a lot of people don't realize that, especially if something's wrong with a shoe and then the next year they're like, oh, why didn't they fix it? People don't realize that shoes
it's a weird
like, maybe talk about that, how far in advance you're kind of working on shoes and how that works.
So currently we're working all the way out to spring summer 25 with early starts of kind of setting the direction, validating some stuff that we want to do. But it's an interesting cycle, and you've known this from working with all the brands. It's one of those things, as we're launching a shoe to market, it's just like the second one is, if not complete, like nearing completion. It's very tough to course correct right away. So a lot of times when one shoe launches, especially a new concept, the second one's going to be a pretty measured or conservative update. And then usually you can aggregate the learnings of those first two and say, hey, we're going to make a bigger leap forward into the third version as well. So it's very tough when you get something out there and you think runners going to react a certain way. Sometimes it's a like a happy surprise. They're like, wow, it's just like they're using it for this and we didn't intend it. Like that was a great learning. But other times there's things you want to correct and it's kind of tough because you're so far down the pipeline in the second version.
Yeah. That's the thing. It's just it's a long lead time or
totally,
timeline for product development. So I know in the past, I would say like 8 years ago, I don't know, when Under Armour is entering into running, they kind of made a splash. Everything was like, they went into running and people were buying into it and good. And then kind of like there was like a dip a little bit there. And I feel like, and from what I heard, you guys are trying to make a push to be like really focused on running. Obviously, I think this is a good sign of that. Can you talk more about that and maybe how things have realigned in the last, maybe since you've been here, really?
Yeah, completely. And Under Armour is a unique company. We started on the apparel side and we started on a team sports side. But like I said, it's involved in a run, and everyone knows running is the biggest participation sport in the world. It's global. It's kind of that one thing that can unify across regions and everything else. But it has been a thing where it's been some ups and downs. But I think they've seen over the last few years of what we can do when we really focus on run and really align the team. And I think it started with the Portland office of really being specific to footwear. And like I said, really focusing on a lot of run innovation. And then we're starting to see, as we bring in that athlete component, what it can really mean for the brand. And it's super exciting because we've really started to establish what the future looks like. As we build the new headquarters in Baltimore, the first thing you see is a full track outside.
Yeah.
And so that's something where it's super excited. And as we, really focus on our athletes, just like a lot of brands, and most of them are out in Flagstaff and maybe a few other places, but it's also like we need that presence in Baltimore because that's where we are. That's where we want our athletes to be. And we could also build up our run community here in Baltimore as well. So we're kind of looking at kind of like what we need for those foundational pieces to really march forward and really, really move quickly. So like I said, we're primed with our innovation and inline teams out in Portland, really building out the system here in Baltimore. And like I said, we're always trying to put it through the Under Armour lens. It's like nobody wants another kind of Me Too brand who doesn't have the perspective.
Sure.
But the thing that strikes me from day one at Under Armour, it's so athlete focused and athlete driven. And like I said, this product wouldn't be here if it wasn't for our athletes speaking up and saying we need a better solution here, and like let's get on this journey together to create it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, and as someone who lives in Baltimore, obviously I'm always rooting for Under Armour hardcore because you do so much for the city. Obviously through not just the job creation and being the kind of flagship, brand in the city, but also the community work that Under Armour does, with charitable work, things like that. It's hugely important to Baltimore. And, so it's exciting to see that, that steadfast commitment to, like you said, building that track, which by the way, when does that open? Because I'm excited about it.
I'll give you an update. It's getting pretty close.
Okay,
here,
all right.
Yeah.
So I know that's not open yet, but I think everyone's excited about that and seeing what you're doing in Port Covington and like the new headquarters. So yeah, it's really cool to see that and just the focus of, I don't know. I love that Under Armour's here in Baltimore. That Baltimore's always seems to be an underdog story.
Yeah.
No matter
we're a big brand, but in the run space, we are still that underdog, and you have to have that mentality.
And Under Armour has a long history of creating premium products. I know personally, some of the Under Armour gear I have is like literally the best thing I've ever bought.
Yeah.
And so it's exciting to see the development like going forward and staying true to that.
Totally. And I think it's like not just doing the big things of putting in a track or building up a team, but it's the small things of showing up at spike nights and sponsoring the local events and like kind of being there cheering on the runners on the finish line. So it's the stuff where there's no money coming in for that. There's no revenue, but it's like, if you want to be in the space and you want to support runners, it's like those little things matter. It's like I said, it's the running community is, the running population is huge, but like the community gets pretty small when you get down to it.
Yeah. I mean, I think authenticity matters. It doesn't matter how big you are, being authentic and reaching out to the people who support you, and what, like you said, whether or not that's a revenue driver on the surface or not, I still think it's important to to
Yeah.
show up.
Yeah, and like authenticity, it's like there's longevity too. It's just like we can't just be authentic for a year and then go dark. It's just like you have to be consistent. Like the brand's going to evolve, but as long as we stayed committed to that runner and that athlete, it's just like that's what builds it over the long haul and that credibility with runners.
Yeah, definitely. So let's see. We covered the Flow Velocity Elite team. By the way, how did you end up? I know you said you just selected the elite team, and but how did that actually the application process go?
I'm not totally specific.
Okay.
I know
Sorry,
a lot of
I
it
guess
was
it's more
just
than
like
marketing.
I know of from our sports marketing team and Hannah and the team.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it was just like when the concept started to come to life. Heather Martin on sports marketing, I think, had the original idea. It's just like right away, I think it's like you can think of those runners like Jessica Pons, who's in accounting at Under Armour. She's won Vermont City. She's an amazing thing. She's an amazing tester for us. It's just like, how can you not have someone like that who's just like kind of embodies like what you want in like that local runner? It's like, how could someone like like that not be a part of the team?
I mean, that's what I like about a lot of the team is that when we talk about Baltimore as an underdog place or just kind of that grind, a lot of the runners on this team embody that. They're, like you said, 9-to-5s, they're moms, they're dads, they're people just
they're doing podcasts like Brandon,
setting up cameras for this podcast. And I like that is part of the mission for this project.
Completely.
Yeah. And of course, doing it in Baltimore at the marathon is always a big deal.
Totally.
So let's see. I'm trying to think. So we talked about, the team, the shoe. We got the new office coming. That's exciting. And then everything that's going on with the development of new product. Is there anything else we need to cover?
No, those are the kind of key ones I want to hit. But like I said, the future is super exciting. And like I said, it's amazing when we could kind of triangulate those things of having a sports marketing being completely on board with giving us access to elite athletes and like those local heroes to get product feedback on. Our innovation and inline teams really pushing forward, and that just really sets a great template for us for the future. Like I said, I've been at other places where it's very tough to get access to an athlete to get product feedback, so you're somewhat kind of guessing here. But credit to Under Armour, like I said, always putting that athlete first and letting that drive the product creation process.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'm excited to see what comes for sure. I'm also excited to run in the shoe, even though I haven't yet. So, but I was trying to take it out last week, I think, for some speed work, and then I laced it up. And I was like, oh yeah, this is actually too big. But I feel like I actually feel, this is a side note that I'm going to end with. I feel like over the pandemic, my shoes, my foot has either shrunk or the last of shoes, or just like the sizing of shoes has grown longer because what used to be my normal size is now like mostly big for me. Okay. So I always had to keep like asking for running in bigger shoes.
Really?
And I'm scared to size down because I don't want to have a shoe that's too tight. I can run in a shoe that's a little too big.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just weird.
You were not going crazy. If you run the Flow Velocity Wind, there was actually some modifications here. So one thing we wanted to do was make sure, like I said, that runner is engaging the plate fully in the forefoot. So we actually flattened it out a little bit in the forefoot and created a little more volume there.
Yeah.
So that's probably what you're feeling there is like a little deeper platform and a little wider gauges.
Right.
That's probably going to affect the fit a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyways, but I'm excited to run this shoe and for sure to see what else. Do you have any news on daily trainers, anything like that coming out?
So what we're working on here, like I said, it's going to continue to inform the lineup going forward.
Okay.
So we'll have some stuff to share at TRE. That's going to be
Cool,
pretty exciting. But yeah, some exciting stuff in the pipeline for track, road, and track and field.
Okay, and we didn't even mention when this will be available to the general public and at what price.
So we did a limited release in fall 22, but we will come to market in February 2023, and it is $250.
Okay, so right in line with all the other racers.
Yep.
Cool. All right, well, Doug, thanks for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, glad it's worked out.
Looking forward to Baltimore, seeing what happens, especially with Brandon. And we're going to make him work immediately there after he crosses the finish line.
Awesome. Love it.
All right, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Bye.